Welcome to Museum Rat. I am your host, Doug Y. I am traveling all over the country to art museums and gallery shows, coming back to the beautiful Pasadena Media Studios and telling you all about it here on Arroyo Channel. Today we're going to be looking at the contemporary and American modern collections of the CROCKER Museum in Sacramento. We will also be looking at a survey of their early Californian landscapes and how the depiction of landscape changes over 100 years, sort of from 1830 to 1850, over the next 100 years to about the 1950s. And we have to get started because first, we're going to be looking at the Art Extraordinario show at the CROCKER, which was a survey of Latinx art currently being produced. So this is contemporary Latinx art, and we're going to go ahead and get started. Still Life Reflections, Estelle Chavez, beautiful, classic. The Technique, wonderful. La Endecha, Carlos Merida. I love that they pull from so many traditions and then it comes out in their own culture. This is called Devoured by Symbols. This is a huge piece. It's all been stitched. Look at that. Could get lost in it. Juan Carlos Quintana did the next two. This is Celebrating Hubris with Hijinks. Scathing social commentary, and he does it again. In Go-Go Days Are Over, Enjoy the Party While It Lasts. The bright colors are being dinged out by shadow, by dark, by the browns and pieces. It should be a happy party, but he's using different techniques to make it feel unsettling and perhaps sinister. Moving on, one of my favorites, this is called Clown. This is by the Date Farmers, which is a pair of artists who work together, Armando Lerma and Carlos Ramirez. And they also did the next one. I'd want him at my birthday party. This is Yellow Panther. They do a lot of reclaimed metals. They find things and put them into the compositions. These two sculptures are both from Peru. Look at the expression on that. There's so much life in that expression. There's so much soul. There's so much intensity. It's difficult, just taking that picture, I remember, it's difficult to be in the gaze of this piece. There, different person, intense life in that expression. But my favorite part about this is that sweet little puppy dog that she's carrying. Isn't that wonderful? I love him. This is called Quince. This is Yellow Outside by Matt Gonzalez. The next one is Clara Cleaning. She is, in this depiction, Clara is, the figure is working on cleaning the Jeff Koons pieces at MoMA, which brings up all kinds of socioeconomic tensions when it comes to art and art establishment. And finally, in the Latinx, this is Pudica by Gabriela Sanchez. Bold, beautiful. All right, then we're going to be moving on. This is the CROCKER Contemporary Collection, and we're going to start with Fahrenheit by Micah Candrell Bear. Variation, Mutation, Cascade by Amy Ellington. This was one of my favorite pieces just because it's whimsical, it's fun. This is called Dot Transport Cabinet. It is obviously absurd, but whimsical, fun, makes you laugh, makes you happy, makes you think about a life where a little more magic is involved. And what we imagine, we can manifest. And this is exactly what this piece is saying. Followed by Moving Out This is a little bit closer into the piece because it is huge and the detail work is masterful. Boy, is that dense. These are really interesting. Akinsanya Kambon, American artist, born 1946, did both of these. The first one, Equestrian John Randall, Buffalo Soldier. The second one, Equestrian Black Samson. Interesting man, U.S. Marine, the artist, U.S. Marine, Black Panther, and an art professor. At some point got into some cultural hot water by putting together a Black Panther coloring book and bringing up the specter of indoctrination of children. I love this piece. I have a soft spot for California agricultural advertising, the styles of it, the colors, the contrasts, the sky, the skin tones, the evocation of a certain bountiful, sunbathed lifestyle, and it comes through here. This is a favorite of mine. Kenton Nelson did California Calendar. Anderson Valley Night, we won't spend too much time with this because you can't see much of it, but when you're up real close to this, it's an incredible piece because it's a highway at night, and the stars and the cars and the roads and the landscape, there's an incredible amount of detail, but it's done very, very subtly. Oh, that's difficult to control, that kind of color. Walking Woman, this is in bronze. Beautiful. All Nations Have Their Moments of Foolishness. This is Richard Notkin. And you can see when you go in that each one of these little tiles has its own themes. And then, of course, when put together, it is a portrait of George W. Bush. Moving on to Shoemakers. Hung Liu, born in China, is now in the U.S. as an American citizen. And I think that the thing that she does in this that is so difficult but really beautiful is to get both the detail and the realism of the characters and then to have all of that dripping. The information never gets muddied anywhere in that piece. Very, very difficult to do. This is called Disposizione 1602. It is based on Caravaggio's Disposizione. Jamie Vasta is the artist, and she did this on wood in glitter. Wow. Masterful. Progress 2. Luis Jimenez did this one. The sculpture is fiberglass. It is massive. You have this sort of thin, charging kind of ghost bull, and followed by the cowboy with the horse with red eyes, very Ghost Riders in the Sky. Enormous piece. Ton of energy and momentum in it. Look at it cantilever off of the base there. Wow. Powerful. All of it. Power, energy. Man trying to cultivate, trying to break nature in certain ways, and that bull is having absolutely none of it. And Luis Jimenez did a few side pieces. This is an owl, and then a rattlesnake. This piece is called Tale of a Thousand Condoms, Samurai and Razor. I do not have the full cultural context for this piece. It was painted to bring awareness to HIV in Japan. Night Watch number 7 by Roger Shimomura, which is about a relocation center in Idaho during Japanese internment. Crocker does a lot of standing up for the memory of the Japanese Americans who were interred. This is Stonewall, And you see contemporary artists in the Caravaggio, in the Disposizione, they will go back, they know their history, and they pull genre and use it for their own devices, for what they need from it to tell contemporary stories. This is called In God We Trust. It's by Kevin Ansel. Interesting guy. His biography, he was a homeless child, kind of a vagabond, and he was raised by a tribe of surfers and became an incredible painter. Next we have Spike by Michael Stevens. It can feel nostalgic, it can feel like childhood, but the teeth are sharp. The wood gets a little scraggly, and then when you get in closer, you realize that this huge dog head is made of all of these eyes. Unsettling. This is Outrigger by Robert Hudson. Don't necessarily have to solve anything here. You don't have to solve art in general. You can go bear witness to it, and whatever it's supposed to do, it's doing. Walrus Willamette with Whale Walkers. Mejia Peoples Bright did this one. Hundreds of walruses dancing, and it reminds me a little bit of Yellow Submarine. This is called Joseph Fitzpatrick Was Our Teacher by Raymond Saunders. This starts to move into more of a Robert Rauschenberg context where you need more information, autobiographical information on the artist and his life, or the artist and their life, in order to fully understand, to fully grasp the meaning. You need context, which is true of anything. If you go to a sporting event, you know the rules, which is how you understand why everything that's happening is happening. It's the same thing with art. Sometimes you don't need it. Sometimes it's a beautiful picture. Sometimes it exists on its own and is totally arresting. But sometimes it's a very personal memory. And you need more information to get the full context of the piece. This I really like. This is Combustible Purple, and the reason that I think this is so interesting, this piece was produced in 1969 by Joseph Slutsky, and one of the things that the forms here, the forms and the finish. So think about the painting techniques that are being used, and the shapes and things that are being used. This came out in 1969. Look at how many of these shapes you find in your household objects now. Vacuum cleaners and electric razors and car parts and thigh masters, and I mean there's so many modern forms, and you see that 40, 50 years before they make their way into your hand as a consumer product, you have fine artists working away in their studios considering form. And that trickle down to the general public happens in any kind of study, any form of study. Belly Button Window by David Huffman. Love the title. That little pop of color with the black and white creates an enormous amount of depth by putting the color in the front and the very small character in the back. This is called Winter's Blue Cold, and it really does give an evocation of it being cold. Impressionistic, right? There's a lot of bleed around the characters. And it feels cold in the way the California calendar picture feels warm. The colors, the contrast, the figures, all of it evokes exactly, and the title. He's doing everything he can, Christopher Brown, the artist, he's doing everything he can to make this feel cold, including titling it Winter's Cold. This is Ouroboros Totem by Mark Abelgald. I'm sorry, Mark. It's a kiln cast glass totem pole. Hard to do. Look at all of those forms and the different color. Think about the number of steps that you have to go through to create something like that. Wow. Coyote and Crow Story by Rick Bartow. Rick Bartow was at the Autry here in Los Angeles, and I'll be bringing up the Autry again when we look at Rose B. Simpson, because she has some sculpture work there. I saw her show Lit at the Wheelwright in Santa Fe, New Mexico recently, and changed my life. It really did. And that's part of what this whole show is about. If you just go, you experience not just the art, but the artists, the people out there, and you realize how varied a successful life led can be. How differently people choose or are forced to live in certain ways, and how vastly different those can be. It can give you ideas about your own existence. It can inspire you to do things. It can inspire you to make art, to see art, to experience life a little more fully. And that's what these pieces are supposed to do. Museum, the core word of museum is muse. It's not about dusty, quiet rooms where you have to do mental homework. It is about the passion and essence of life. These artists are all moved so deeply as to create. This is called Force by Alan Hauser. It is in marble. It is dense. It is beautifully finished. And Mimi and Rodolfo Santa Fe opera style, which is a sweet picture. Similar characters in this one. Welga Tim's Song by Judith Lowry. And now we're going to take a turn. We're going to early California art. We're going to be looking at the depiction of landscape in California. But before we do that, I want to highlight one particular artist, Guy Rose, American Impressionist, born in California in 1867 and died in 1925. He was mentored by Claude Monet after this painting, Chrysanthemums, won the Avery Gold Medal at the California School of Design in 1887. He became the director of the Stickney Memorial School of Art in Pasadena, California, which was started in 1912, which I believe, if my research is all correct, Otis was started in 1918. The Stickney School was the first art school in Los Angeles. Jade Beads, this is also Guy Rose. I just love his work. See how impressionistic her kimono gets, but how realistic her face is? The choice of being able to rack focus like that. Monterey Cypress, beautiful. And the light and shadow that are being created in that are an illusion based on the control of color. Very, very difficult to do. And this is Gathering Storm High Sierra, also Guy Rose. We're now going to move to an artist, Thomas Hill, and I'm bringing up these two paintings for a specific reason, Bridal Veil Falls and Bud Lake and Cathedral Peak. These are both in Yosemite National Park. However, both of these paintings were painted before Yosemite was a park. It was God's country, it was wilderness, and look at the perspective, the human perspective here, right? We are at an eye level, a human eye level, and the landscape is immense. Watch it change. Watch the human perspective change over the next 100 years of American landscape that we're going to look at over the next couple of minutes. This is Cattle Watering in Marin County by Thaddeus Welch. He was well known for painting many of the cattle herds in California, which is a great source of wealth for California, always has been. Crossing the Isthmus, The painter who did this, Albertus del Orient Brouwer, was from New York, traveled to California twice, the second time he stayed. But when he did it, he had to, it was a 4-month trip by ship around Cape Horn, so you had to go around South America to get to San Francisco. It took 4 months. Now the innovation, the big transportation innovation, the Uber, if you will, of this time period was to get off a boat in Panama and take a mule for 2 weeks across Panama, pick up another boat, and you could save yourself a couple of months. This painting is a romantic reimagining of his travel, of his mule ride to the Pacific coast of Panama in order to get to San Francisco. Beautiful work. This is an untitled tropical landscape, followed by this enormous picture by Charles Christian Noll, who was the biggest name in California painting, especially landscape and classical painting in the late 1800s. Wow, that detail. The atmospheric distortion as you go back. He does this wonderful little picture of a puppy dog wanting a sausage. I like this piece, and a little child shall lead them. I like the attitude of this little character. The hip swing. All by Charles Christian Noll. Reminds me a bit of Eugene Delacroix. The romance and the horses, the Arabian context. Then we get into water spirits. So this is from 1915. Perspectives moving up. We're cropping things. The instilling fog. Desert Bridge, 1926. Look how differently we are applying color and form and shape. You know, before, realism, classical realism is at the heart of what we're doing. And now, as painters and artists in California, we're beginning to abstract. We're beginning to do impressionism. We are playing with color, with form. This is Demoiselle Cranes. Isn't that lovely? So we've gone from the majesty of, you know, God all the way through to post office. These things start to get smaller. We're in a human scale. This is a canyon in northern Arizona. Look at the stylization of the landscape. Right? We're no longer looking at these pictures as if they're present. We're applying a human aesthetic, how we want them to look. Now we are applying that onto the world. This, I think, is a very interesting when you contrast this piece to the early pieces of the Yosemite Valley. This is Port of Stockton. This is from 1940. Where's the perspective? It's in the sky. We've started to fly. We've started to feel as though we are in control of our world, that we are cultivating it. That human perspective changes so much. The way that we apply our mental terrain, the way we apply how we look at things and what they mean, you can see a vast, vast change in just how we look at the world from those early pictures of Yosemite all the way to this picture of the Port of Stockton. The forms change. It's boats and buildings. We've worked on the waterway. we've changed so many aspects of our world that the natural world begins to recede at the very least from our awareness. And we are far more fascinated with our own creation. This is My World and Yours. Beautiful. This is a Hans Hofmann, and actually, interestingly, when we get deeper into abstract expressionism, Hans Hofmann is unavoidable. But a really good way into abstract expressionism is Georgia O'Keeffe, and we are going to be looking at her work. I went to Santa Fe. I went to the Georgia O'Keeffe Museum, in addition to a number of other wonderful places. And when we get towards abstract expressionism, Georgia O'Keeffe is a wonderful way into that world. This is Doug Y. from Museum Rat. Thank you for being with us today. See you next time.